Today's episode of DRL is brought to you by Hella Cocktail Company. My guests don't just come to DRL for me. They also come for the cocktails. Luckily, my friends at Hella Cocktail Company have my back. These guys make amazing mixes, from Bloody Mary to Margarita to Moscow Mule. They also make cocktail bitters, my secret ingredient, and now yours too. It's easy to feel like the best bartender in town when every bottle comes with a simple recipe on it. Hella Cocktail Company, bold flavor, real ingredients, hospitality. Mixing it up since 2011. Shop the collection on Amazon Prime or use code DRL online at hellacocktail.co for free shipping. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tanisha Wood. Today, I'm here with Mika. Well, I'm virtually here with Mika. Hi, Mika.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How you doing tonight?
I'm all right. All right. Staying in. That's
what are you drinking? I see you're drinking. Is that wine?
This is soju. So
what is soju?
Soju is a Korean drink.
Mm-hmm.
It's like their version of wine. It's like a sake, actually. So
okay,
it's kind of the same thing, except it's flavored. So this is peach flavored, which is
that
delicious.
Sounds good.
It is good.
Really...
It is very good. I am very happy to be drinking this right now.
You know, for the longest time, I used to think that wines were not just grapes, because you know how sometimes when you'll read the description of a wine, it'll be like notes of blueberries and cinnamon bark. And I'm like, oh, wow, like this is going to taste really good. And I fully thought that wines had these sorts of things in them. Like I didn't think that they were just like, these are the flavors people get when they taste it. And I'm like, I'm not getting the berries. Like, where are the berries? I'm not getting the cinnamon bark.
You're like, I'm not tasting it. I don't know what this description is all fucked up.
Right. Like, do I just not have a sophisticated palate?
Basically is what they're trying to tell you. Because, you know, the wine connoisseurs will let you know that they have tasted every part of it. And you're like, what? I've watched those sommelier videos.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, let me try. I could do that. And I'm like, it just tastes like wine. Like, that's it.
So does that actually have peach in it, or does it just have a peach flavor hint?
It's a peach flavor hint.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Now I know.
Just a hint of flavor.
Well, thank you for coming on tonight. I met you through your boyfriend a couple years ago. His name was Reggie, and he was well known. He had a podcast called The Combat Jack Show. The first time I actually met Reggie, let me tell you how I met him, and this is how I will describe him. I don't know if you know Chris. He photographed for the podcast at LSN. Yep. And I met Chris, and then one day he was telling me about Reggie and the whole network and the show, and I was like, this sounds like a guy I should like do some work with. Like I'm going to meet him. And then he was doing an event somewhere in Brooklyn. And I went to the event, and I just randomly went up to him and I said, so anyway, I wanted to meet you because I'm thinking that we can like work on this thing together and da-da-da. He was doing an event. So there was like a ton of people around him, a ton of people talking to him. And he's like, yeah, just 1 second. Let me just like finish up something and I'll come back to you. And then he actually came back to me and like listened to what I had to say, despite the fact that there was like 200 people like trying to get his attention. And I just thought that was so great. I was like, this man doesn't even know me. You know what I'm saying? Like he doesn't really know what I'm trying to sell or what I'm talking about, but he was just like, he just listened to me. Like I was the only person in the room when he was giving me his attention. So that's the kind of guy he was.
He was like, every person that has ever spoken to him has felt special because they were like, oh, wow, he's giving me all this attention. And he loved it. He never thought of himself as somebody that people wanted to like talk to or work with or collab with. He was like, oh, I'm a fan like everybody else. So when he went to these events or did these events, he was like, oh yeah, this is like, you know, my homie, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk to you. Oh, I'm gonna talk to you. And he'd give advice. Like I remember him sitting at like an event he was doing. I forgot. It was somewhere in Brooklyn. And one of the workers there was just like down. I don't know. He was like one of the bartenders or whatever he was. And they spoke for a good half hour Like after the show, people were trying to get like talk to him, and Reggie was like, "No, I'm good." He's like, "I'm talking to this guy right now," and they were talking about life and like the universe and all this stuff, and I was like, "Wow, this is why you're so special, is because you can do something like that. You can make
Yeah.
people feel, and it means something. Like it was honest. Like he wasn't doing it because this is what he had to do
Right.
so people would listen to him. Like, this was him. Like he cared about everybody, and it was amazing. That was amazing.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
really amazing guy.
Yeah.
So unfortunately he passed away and you guys were together at the time. How are you? Like how have you dealt with that? You know, how are you dealing with it now?
I think I went through like a pretty dark period after he passed away. I was still trying to figure out like how to live and like still understand what happened at the same time. Um, because I was his quote unquote caretaker at the time, like I was the person that was kind of in charge of everything.
Mm.
There was a lot of pressure on my end to like make sure that everybody knew what was happening, all this stuff. And so the stress of that was really big. And then when he passed, it was kind of like, oh my God, I have to do all this other shit. And it was like, so I didn't really have time to process. Like I was more like, yo, this is something's happening,
Do.
something's up. Yeah. And I was like, I have to get this done, I have to get this done, I have to do this, I have to do that. And like, my friends were like, "Oh, slow down. Like, what are you doing?" Like, I started a new job. I like went like full force into like podcasting, and I started doing like I was producing for mad people, and it was just like I was so ready to just be busy. Like I didn't want to be in a space where I had to remember anything, and especially like since he lived in my apartment, like it was like, oh, you know there are things that I remember, and things like what was happening at the time. And so it was really hard for me at first. I was so lucky to have amazing friends and amazing family, like all the people from loudspeakers, like Chris Morrow, Jonathan Mena, A King. Like they were everything for me. Like they held me down when I needed it. They were my family when things were going down. So, I was very lucky for that. And then, my friends would come over. They brought me food. They brought me alcohol. They brought me whatever the fuck I need. They're like, "Yo, what do you need? I got you." Like every day they spent at least the first 3 weeks of me like having to deal with it. They were there for me. Like they were at my house. They stayed over. They slept. Like it was amazing, the amount of support and love that I had from my friends and my family and all that. It was hard for the first like 3 months. I was probably wilding out a little bit. Like I was going out, being crazy, drinking, whatever. Because I was like, oh, I gotta,
Just
I
trying to
was,
stay numb.
yeah, I was like, yo, fuck this. I don't want to think about anything anymore. And then yeah, and then afterwards, I was like, "Wait a minute, I need to really get my life together." So then I started really, like, seriously working on, like, all the things that I'm doing. So it was, the podcast, my new job, like, all this stuff that was happening, and I was like, "Yo, I got this." And, like, it started becoming easier in
Mhm.
a way, to handle things, but it was still like, there was still this, like, sadness that I had inside me. And I
Mhm.
didn't know exactly what the problem was. So then, of course, I went to therapy,
As
and
we
I
all
was like,
should.
yes, exactly. Therapy is amazing. And I went to therapy. I was like, okay, let me, see if I could unravel like what's happening with me. And, I'm still in therapy. I'm on medication. I'm on like, I was going through it. I was going through a really hard time, and I couldn't get out. Like I didn't know what to do. The people around me didn't know what to do at this point, and I needed it. I needed the help. It took me like 6 months until I decided to get help and like really think about it, and like think about like, you know, if I need to take medication, if I was okay with that. And that was a whole different world for me to like
Mhm.
start doing all of this. So it's like, I was like, am I not helping myself by not taking drugs, or am I helping myself by taking, like,
Right.
all those questions, because you never want to be like, oh yeah, I'm that person that's on, whatever medicine to make me happy, and I
Like, you
need to
don't wanna
feel
feel
this
like you
way.
have to have that to be able to live a normal life. Like, am I completely abnormal now if I get off of this?
Yes, exactly. And that's like the whole thing. It was like, am I going to be okay? Like with the medication and all that stuff that I do take, there's a lot of ups and downs, and like, trying to figure out which medication works for you, how many milligrams and all that stuff. But like, it is helpful. I'm not forgetting what it is that I'm dealing with. It's just an aid to help me in order to continue working and continue like doing the things that I want to do.
So, let's rewind a bit. How did you and Reggie, like, first meet? Or, like, what was the love story that brought you guys together?
I basically was working for the Combat Jack show. So I was working for him. And then at some point, he started going through his separation with his wife. And then I was going through a breakup with a long term boyfriend. And somebody else on the team was also going through some shit. And like, we were all like, everyone on the team was kind of on this low. And we were
Breakup
all like,
season.
yeah, it was like breakup season. Everyone was like, oh man, everyone's going through it. And so I usually got a ride home because I live near King and Mena. So one of them would always take me home at night. And one night, Reggie decided to drop everybody off. So like we started talking, and then ended up he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna drop King off first, and then we could still talk. You're on my way back." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I didn't think anything of it. I was like, "Wow, like we talk, but like it was never on a like we talk about music,
It wasn't on,
but
like,
it
a
never."
deep personal level.
Exactly, and then we got to that level where it was like, "Oh, what happened?" And, like, we started having connection, kinda like, "Oh, wow, like, you understand what I'm going through, and I understand what you're going through." He gave me a book that I should read.
Love when a man gives you a book. Like, there is something about that where it's like, I'm trying to expand your mind. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love it
Yes.
when people give you knowledge beyond the time period or your relationship with them. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you could like buy me a nice bag, I guess, but like, how long is that going to last? But if like you're giving me real knowledge, like,
Yep.
that's forever.
I was getting out of a 6-year relationship, so it was like my head was, like, not in the right spot, and I was like, "What the fuck happened?" And I read that, and I was like, "Wow, that's some real shit." From that point on, he started, like, texting me here and there, and I was like, "Hey." And then he'd be like, "Oh, yo, you wanna come out?" And I'll be like, "No, not at all." And he'd be
So
like,
were you just
"Oh."
not interested at that point when you were like, I don't want to come out, or you were still just like, I'm getting over this 6 year thing. I can't even think about this.
I was more like, "Why the fuck do you wanna hang out with me?" Like, I I'm a true Scorpio, so, I don't trust anybody. I'm like, "Oh, what are your intentions? What is happening? Like, why are you asking me?" I don't So, it took a while. It took a while till I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let's go hang out." And it was, like, one night after we were recording, like, we had so much fun because, like, we got it. We knew, like, we were on the same level. Even though we were years apart, we were still like at
What
that
was your
level.
guys' age difference?
12 years.
Okay, that's not like too crazy, but
Yeah, it's not crazy, but it's still a little,
yeah.
it's up there. And then he asked me out again, and he picked me up. We went to the beach, and it was like insane. Like it was
Like the
probably like
beach?
like a beach. Yeah, he drove me to a beach. Like
I was like, wait, do people actually go to the beach in New York? Like, I went to
yes.
Coney Island like once.
As you should. That's probably the only. Yeah, that's all you need to do is one time at Coney Island. And he like yeah, so it wasn't Coney Island, but he took me to a beach, and we went to like this bar that he really liked that had tacos in the back, and like we ate food and we talked and whatever, and then we took a stroll on the boardwalk. It was really
Oh.
romantic. It was like really romantic. And I was like, "Oh shit, this is really cute." So, that was our first kiss. And then I also was thinking like I'm working for him. And I was like, I don't want to be that chick that's like, "Oh, I got in the game because, I was sleeping with the
Right,
boss or
right.
whatever." So there was a lot of things. So I was like extra worried on top of that. I didn't want people to think that I was trying to like get ahead in any way. I waited a long time until anything ever happened with him. Like he was okay
So
with it.
what
Like
was it that finally made you be like, "Okay, I'm in?"
he was just so persistent. Like not to say that, you know, if you continue harassing me, I'm gonna do something, but like he was so genuine with it, you know, and like he showed me every step of the way that he was like really invested in me and he really wanted us to like do something. He just wanted to see where it would go. He even said like the reason why he was so into me was because I wasn't into him. Most of the women that he's been with have always tried to get with him. And so like
Right.
he was like, I'm good. And yeah, he'd eventually like, you know, he'd eventually date them or whatever. But like for the most part, it was like, "Oh, you're not trying at all to do anything. Like, you're good just staying there." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." Like, and I would diss him. It was terrible. He hated that
But I
shit.
like a man who is like consistent and persistent, right? Like a man will claim to really like you, but
Mhm.
when you turn them down, then they're like, "Okay, bye." And to me, it's
Exactly.
like, if I really want something, if I really want a job, if I really want to connect with somebody, if I really want anything, I'm not just going to like ask once.
I've never had anyone do that. Yo, I was very honest. Like, I was like, "I don't know if I should because of one, your relationship status, and then of course like, you know, what other people will think." And he always told me, he was like, "Fuck everybody." He's like, why do you care what they think about us? And I was like, you're right. I shouldn't have to think about that. Like I shouldn't have to worry about who, so like what so and so is saying about me if I don't know who they are. Like what's the problem, you know? Like they're not in our relationship, so they have no idea what our connection is and what we're actually doing. And it's like I'm not trying to get ahead in my career in any way, like by dating him or whatever. So you know, it's just one of those things where like I was kind of learning at the
Mhm.
same time, like being in a relationship and understanding and hearing somebody else and like being able to be like, yeah, I'm mature enough to not care about what everybody else thinks, to do what I really want to do. Like, I want to be in a relationship with him. So I should be in a relationship regardless of, you know, all the dumb shit people might say about me. We went ahead with that. We were like, oh, finally, it took a few months and like we were together. And
At the end of the day, life is short and you have to do what makes you happy.
a lot of people are always like, yeah, but what do you think other people are going to say about this? And I'm like, who the fuck cares? Like, one, they're not in your relationship. They don't know what the like what you're talking about. They don't know the, you know, anything. They're not there with you like during those moments where you're actually connecting with them. And I feel
Right.
like in our heads we're all so, especially with social media and all that, so like we're like, oh my god, relationship goals, like, you know, and we're always trying to be the best and showing everyone that we're the best couple ever, and it's like no, everybody goes through some shit.
At the end of the day, it's about like knowing that these things are going to happen and you're going to go through it, but like finding the person you actually want to go through that with. Like that's the
Exactly.
key. It's like it's going to happen. Like hands down, death, taxes, and going through some stuff in a relationship are for certain. So like who do you want to go through it with?
Exactly.
So how long were you guys together before he got sick?
So we were only dating for like a year and a half
Mm.
before he got sick, and we had no idea what was happening. You know, he like when we were dating, it started like, you know, he'd be like, "Oh, my stomach hurts." You know, people go through
Right.
stomach pains all the time, and like, and his stomach would hurt, and like, you know, I'd be like, "Oh, you should go to the doctor," and he would be like, "I don't trust doctors," which is, you know, fair. That's a normal response, I know. So like, you know, he was trying to go the whole like acupuncture, like he didn't want to do like Western medicine at all, and even the acupuncturist, like, she was like, "Oh, you need to have him go to a doctor. I think there's something wrong." And I was like, I can't force him. I've been trying. Like,
Right.
he's stubborn as fuck." And I was like, "Yo, you need to go to the doctor." And like, it took so long until he decided to see a doctor. And even when he saw the doctor, they didn't even do the right test. They didn't really look for what was wrong with him. And they were like, "Oh, must just, you know, your liver is all fucked up. Yeah, you should just stop drinking." And it wasn't that, you know, and we had to find out when we had to go to the emergency room, so it wasn't even like we had a chance to really figure anything out. It was like, oh, let's go to the emergency room. You can't get out of bed. Like he couldn't walk at
Oh my
that point.
gosh.
Yeah. So finding that out and like, being in a relationship for, it was a year and a half or whatever. And it's not crazy, but like when that person does get sick and like things just are completely switched over to what it's a lot. It is a lot. There's a lot of like responsibility on my end, and then like there's just a lot of responsibility to keep him happy, keep everybody else happy, and then also try to keep sane in the middle of being like in between everybody.
So once
And
he
his
got sick, once you guys went to the emergency room that day, he was sort of like completely kind of debilitated after that, or
No, it was okay. So this is it was kind of crazy. It was like right after we came back from A3C, which is in Atlanta, the big hip hop festival. And a week after that, he just couldn't get out of bed. Like his stomach hurt, he was in pain, he was sweating. I was like, oh, we got to go to the emergency room. He was like, oh, I can't right now. So I have to go get my daughter. So he was like, let me go pick her up, blah, blah, blah. So he left and I was like, I really want you to go to the doctor, please. Like, we have to go to the emergency. He's like, after, I take care of her, I'll go to the emergency room. I was like, okay, cool. So I'm texting him the whole time, making sure he's okay. And then finally he has time to get out. We go to the emergency room and like it was surreal. Like it was just like I don't even like I can't even remember like all of it, but it was kind of like we got in there, he got tested for everything. The nurse was like, "Hey, so, your liver is a little enlarged, but I'm going to let the doctor talk to you." So we waited, doctor came and he was like, "Oh," so he sat down. He was like, "Yeah, I have some bad news." And we were like, "Hmm?" And we were like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Yeah, you have cancer."
oh my
He's
god.
like, "And your colon has exploded. So you are not doing so well right now. That's why you're in so much pain. So what we're going to have to do is take you to another hospital to get surgery. We're going to put you in an ambulance, this and that." And I was like, what, what the fuck?
So
I
it
did
just went from 0 to 100 like real
real
quick.
quick. Yeah. And
Wow.
so I was staring and I think I started like at that point I just started tearing up and I look at Reggie and he's like, "Damn." He's like, "Life comes at you fast." And I was like,
Said that? Wow.
which then I started laughing, which I don't know if it was the appropriate response, but I was like, "You're an ass. Like he literally just said some crazy shit to you and you're like, life comes at you." Like, what?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I was like, and I couldn't disagree. Yeah, you're definitely correct about that. So, you know, after that talk, we were put into an ambulance. Got rushed to another hospital. They started giving him like all the drugs because
So he had to have this surgery like right away.
oh yeah,
Oh
immediately.
wow.
Because if not, he would have died. So they said like if he didn't do anything that night, he would have passed away that night. There would have been no chance of him like recovering at all. At this point, it's probably like 12 in the morning, and I'm by myself. I'm talking to King and Mena and Chris, and like, I'm keeping them updated, but of course, like certain points, everyone just passes out, everyone's sleeping, and I'm up here, and I'm alone, and I've never had to deal with like somebody in the hospital and being by myself. Like usually, my mom will be there, like my sister will be there, someone will be there just to like, help with the stress levels. So it was a new experience for me to feel that way. And like, he didn't get out of surgery until like 5 or 6 in the morning. So I was up that whole time just waiting for something, anybody to tell me anything. I was like looking down the hall. I was, you know, anything. Um, and then they finally told me that surgery was fine, he was good, that I could go see him. And I was like, all right, cool. So, I saw him, and, they had to give him like a bag because his colon was broken and all that. So it was, yeah, it was just a lot. He had like the tubes in his nose, like it looked crazy. It was a very intense moment for me. And I was like, oh my God. And like, he was like, oh, don't
Like,
worry.
what
We
was
got
going through your
this.
head at that moment? Just like, because 24 hours before it was all good. We were just chilling. And then
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah. It was a mind fuck. Like I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So for the time whenever I was around him, I made sure I never cried. I only cried when I was by myself, usually just by myself. Um, and like I thought, when I was talking to him, he was like, are you okay? And I was like, why? I'm fine. I'm fine. Are you okay? Like, so a lot of my focus was like, is he okay? Is he going to be okay? What do I need to do to get this, like, get him out of here and, like, moving again and doing what he needs to do? And it was just like, I, I don't know if I went into like some type of auto mode or whatever it was, but it was like, okay, this shit's real. Like, I got to figure this shit out. And I like started going hard with like everything. Like, he didn't have insurance. So, paying for this doctor's bill, like, how the fuck was that gonna happen? And at the time, I also was, I wasn't working. He went in through the ER and then he had to get emergency, like, surgery, which is ridiculous. So I'm like, so the pressure on me was a completely different thing. So I started focusing so much on like, getting insurance, making sure like all his like things were in order, like, making sure that, everyone knew what was happening, people that needed to know, people that didn't need to know, like all the information was being given to certain people. It was a lot. I never thought that it would be cancer. Like I never thought it would be. And I wouldn't have thought it was like, already at the later stages of cancer. So it was like it blew my mind. Like I was like all the things that we were doing together, all the things that we were, planning on doing in the future, like all just disappeared, and I was like, how did it happen? Like I don't get it. I didn't get it. But I was like, fuck it. I have to work with this. So now what do I do? And
It's
there was a little.
amazing how like you just went into that mode. It was almost like you just sort of put your emotions to the side of even grieving about what's happening because it's like
Mhm.
this is what has to be done. That's like
Oh yeah.
the resilience of the human spirit. It's just like when something needs to be done, like we will make it happen.
I didn't think I could do that. Dealing with all this stuff that, my parents usually deal with, like I don't have to do that. And when it came down to it, I was like, wow. And a lot of people were like, you don't have to do this. Like you're not his girl, like you're not his wife. Like you have a reason to come out. You could say that this is too much for you and you could continue, moving on with your life. And I was like, what the fuck type of person would I be?
Right.
I was
Like I'm going
like,
to leave you right now.
yeah. And I was like, yo, I get like it is hard. It is. It's a weird situation. It is hard. It is crazy. But like, why wouldn't I want to help you? Like this is the time you need me the most. So I made sure I was there 100%. I was there at the hospital every day.
At this point, when he was still in the hospital, did he have a prognosis as to like how long, or did you think he's going to come out of here?
The first time he was in the hospital, it was kind of like he could be okay. He could be okay for another few years. That was kind of what they were saying. And like Reggie didn't believe that shit. He was like, fuck that. I'm going to get over it. So I don't want to put any type of numbers. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to. So like for me, it was a little different because they were speaking like, to let me
Right.
know just so I could be a little bit more prepared. And it wasn't until the second time he went to the hospital where, they were sitting me down. They gave me a time frame and then they kind of like made it a little smaller. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, and I was like, okay, okay. So like they were trying to prep me because I was the one that was there every day. So they were like, oh, you need to, are you going to be okay? are you going to be? And I was like, it's not about me right now. Like, I
So
don't care
how
about
did
what
you
is that.
process that? Like you're with this man, you love this man, and then they're like, look, he only has so much time. Like what was going through your mind in like them giving you a time frame?
I went through this whole like, oh my God, is this God punishing me? Like, is this, I find someone that I'm in love with that, fits everything that I would want in somebody. And like, now you're taking them away from me. And it's like, I must have been an asshole. I must have been an asshole back in the day. Something must have happened that I deserved that shit. And then I was like, this is life. And I was like, there's gotta be something. There had to be a reason. And like, it's weird because like me and Reggie would always talk about how like, our past lives. He was Buddhist, and I became Buddhist a little later after that, after he introduced me to his practice. And like we would talk about like, who we were in the past. And he'd always ask me, he's like, who were you? Who were you? And then when he got sick and like this, I was like, I must have been someone important because I was the one who was taking care of you. So
Mhm.
then he was like, oh, and he was like, this is why. And so, he's, that connection of like who we were in our past and who we were at that moment. And it was just like, wow, you were the person that took care of me. So like, I don't know who I was in his past, but apparently I was someone important. And like, to me, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make the best that I could. Like, you know, I would come in every day. I would, you know, play music for him. I would, talk to the doctors for him, make sure that everything was going okay, like prepare him for like whoever was visiting and making sure that they were there and like timing everyone out to make sure that they were out at the right time, in at the right time. And then like, at the end of the day, it was like I usually slept over, so I would have to make like a makeshift bed. So I would make it out of the two chairs and I would ask for extra pillows and blankets and I would just sit there and I would make sure that like, if he needed anything at night, blah, blah, blah. Like I just made sure that he was as comfortable as he possibly could be. And that was the only thing that I could do. I was just trying to make him happy, you know.
Do you feel like you said everything that you wanted to say?
Absolutely not. There's always something that I didn't say or something that I wish I said or something I wish he was like awake to hear, or like, I don't know, maybe he was. I wish I thanked him more for what he did for me, and I don't think I realized the impact that he had on my life until he was gone. Like, I didn't realize how much he gave to me as a gift. Like I have grown so much just understanding myself more.
What did you do when he first passed? What was that moment like for you?
Oh my God. That was probably the worst moment of my life. He did a procedure that was going to be risky. And we both knew that. And he was like, oh, I want to do it. It didn't work out the way we wanted it to. Shit went really wrong that night. He ended up blacking out. He couldn't breathe at that point, and then put into ICU. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching him, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? And like, they're like, yeah, you should get in contact with all the people that he needs to like all these. And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. This is happening. And I was like, this,
It's
I
one of
don't
those things you
know.
can't ever prepare for. Like, even when you
No,
know something's coming, like, how do you prepare for a moment like that?
like I knew things would go wrong, but I didn't think it was going to happen like that night. Like he was fine. Like we were getting ready for him to leave. So for him to go back and then, have, a surgery that fucked everything, like it, to me, it's always like, oh, maybe I should have said no. That is something that I have to work out on my own, like, trying to figure that out. It was bad. It was crazy. It was a very crazy night. There's a lot happening. And then the next day he was unconscious and I didn't know what to do. So I ended up like, I called up all friends, family, everybody and sat around, talked to him. Everybody was there that needed to be there. And then, everyone started leaving. And everyone's like, oh, you should go home. You should go home, take a shower, maybe take a nap. You've been up for 2 days already. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay. So I left and I was like making sure, I was like, please call me if there's anything that goes wrong, blah, 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 blah. And the minute I got out of my shower, my phone rang and I was like, oh
Oh,
no. And I picked up, they're like, you have to come to the hospital. right now. And I was like, okay. Got to the hospital. I spoke to one of the nurses there. She actually was one of the people that were there when we went to the emergency room the second time.
Mhm.
And she was like, I remember you guys. She's like, I'm really rooting for you. Um, I really, but I'm going to let you know right now that there's nothing that we're going to be able to do. Like,
Oh,
this is everything we can do. And if we take anything off of him, he's just going to pass away. And I was like, oh my God. I had to make the decision of like not trying to revive him at all. And what I had to do was sit there and I had to wait until it was all over. And it was the hardest time, and it was terrible. And he passed away in the morning, like early morning, like 7 in the morning the next day. It was a lot. It was, I don't think I slept that night. I didn't sleep. Yeah. I didn't sleep for like days. It was insane. It was like an intense moment. Like I've never had to deal with anything like that on my own, like ever. I wasn't prepared for it at all. Everybody was trying to be as supportive, but I was like, nobody gets it. I don't think you understand what it means to take care of someone like every day and like be in love with that person and then have them go away for, like, yeah, older people get that, like
right.
long term, whatever. And like, it was really hard for me to feel a connection with someone to be like, oh, you get what I'm going through. Like, yeah, you've lost somebody. All of that is fucked up. But I guess I've never had to deal with someone that I was in love with, someone that I was preparing to be with for the rest of my life, and then having them like taken away so quickly. And it was just like, it wasn't fair. I was like, that's not fair. And I was angry. I was super angry.
Do you feel
And I
like
didn't
you got to
know.
say goodbye?
I did. Like, I wish when he was conscious, I would have been able to say this to him, but I didn't, and I got to say my goodbyes to him. Like, I don't know if he heard me, but like, I'm hoping he did. Like, I'm hoping that unconscious moments he's still there. And I was like, oh, it was, it sucked because I was so ready for him to get out of the hospital. And like we were so, like we were preparing for the next steps of him leaving, that to have that happen that night and go all so bad, like, it was that was crazy. That was, I wasn't expecting that. So like for me to say goodbye was not, I wasn't thinking about it that night. It was just a big old mess. It was a big old mess. It
So
really
when
was.
had to say goodbye and you left the hospital, went home eventually, like, then what? Like, then what? You walk into this place that you guys shared together. Like, how do you deal at that point? Like, what do you
Ugh,
do?
it was the oddest feeling to be there. And it was like, it was something, it was just weird. It felt weird. It didn't feel right. I felt like something was missing and I was like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden, within 10 minutes of me being in my apartment, all my friends came fucking running up, like they're on the like, open the door, open it up. That's kind of how like I was able to be okay with the spot, because there was people there that were making me not forget, but like making me feel like, okay, there are people here that love me and I could just rely on them right now and just like be here and do whatever. Like I said whatever I wanted. I wasn't even making sense at that point. I think it was too much for me at that. And I was like, what? And people were like, I don't know what you're saying, but that's okay. You're good. And I was like, I don't know if I'm okay. Like, and they're like, you're not supposed to be okay. And I was like, oh, it was a struggle of like thinking about my feelings and how I needed to be okay in order for me to move on in my life. Like, and that was a big task, was being like, oh, I need to put myself first before anybody. And I couldn't understand that for a little while.
And it's also like, it's hard to recognize that it's okay not to be okay. You know, I
Exactly.
feel like we're
And
always, no matter what happens in life, we're always trying to get to a point where we're okay. And sometimes it's
yeah,
like, you have to sit in that. Sometimes like you have to sit in not being okay and being okay with not being okay.
Being okay. I couldn't get that, and I couldn't put that in my head, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I was like, "No, I'm okay. Fuck not okay, I'm okay." And I
Mm.
kept trying to say that to myself, and I remember there were days where I'd be in my apartment just being like, "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. I'm not okay, I'm not okay," and then just start crying. And I was like, "Yo, I'm not okay. Like, I'm not okay," and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't understanding the feelings that I was having, like, I knew I was gonna be going through the grief, but I never knew what it was gonna feel like. Like, I had no idea. Like, I've never had this feeling before. I've
It's like
never
you can't
wanted
prepare
to.
yourself.
No, not at all. And like, they were right. Like the doctors are right, completely right when they were saying like, you should think about getting help and this and that. And like I was like, yeah, fuck you. I'ma fucking do this. Like you don't know me. I got this. And like I didn't get it at all. Like it was probably the most it was just crazy. Like I didn't know how to act. I didn't know what was the right behavior. I didn't know what grieving was supposed to look like. And when I went to therapy, they were like, oh, grieving is what you go through. Nobody has a formula. It's not like, you're supposed to be like this after a week or this after 2 weeks. So I wasn't sure how to feel anymore. And like, I then suppressed it to the point where I was like, no, what? I'm good. I'm good. Everything is
If I could
good.
just convince myself of it, then
Yeah.
it's true.
Exactly. I was like, you know what? I said I'm good. So then it must be good. And like, and I went, everyone's like, are you sure you're okay? And like, there were those moments where it was like, I was not okay.
How much time did you wait till he had passed to go to therapy?
I think I waited 3 months before I went to therapy because I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And like, he passed away in like late December. So it was like the holidays were happening. And then after the holidays, I started a new job and all this stuff was happening. So I was like, oh, I don't have time. And like, people were like, maybe you should let your job know that, you're going through this. And I was like, I don't want anyone to know, what I'm going through because I don't know them. So, I went through that whole period of working and nobody knew my story. Nobody knew what I was doing. Like, I did my job and it was pretty simple. It wasn't, it wasn't too stressful for me to deal with that and then go home and, do whatever. But I was partying a lot. So like, after work, I was out. I was out drinking heavily, 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 heavily. Until I realized after my 3-month binge of drinking heavily and doing nonsense, therapy was a good place to
Right.
go. I was like, I just started realizing how toxic I was being to myself. And I was like, you know what? I deserve better than that. And I know Reggie would have wanted me to do better. Like, I know he's like, oh, do your thing right now, but you better get your ass into fucking therapy. Like, I know he would have said that shit. Like, I know. And I'm like, all right, you're right. You're right. So, you know, did the fuck shit, went to therapy, realized that drinking was not a good thing.
No.
Drinking when you're sad is not good. So I was like, okay. So I went through that, and I had to learn like grief is hard. Like I still am trying to figure it out. Like obviously, therapy is great.
So what's different now than, 2+ years ago when this first happened? Like, where do you feel like you're at now today, mentally today versus then?
I don't cry as much, which is a good thing. Like I used to cry every day. And that feeling of never being able to get over it was something that like, everyone's like, oh, it's gonna take time, it's gonna take time. But like it's not like I'm over it. Like, like I always think about him. Like again, like I talk to him every day. Like, and everything that I do, I'm like, and I motivated myself to do like all the accomplishments that I have had in the past couple years, I give to him because he wanted me to be better. And so for me, it was like instead of feeling sorry for myself and being like, oh, I need to, drink myself to whatever, I was like, nah, that's dumb. I need to work on myself. Like there was something like there was a reason why he was so like into my job and into everything that I do and like supported me like as much as he could. And it was all because he believed in me. And so I was like, oh, so what am I doing? So I had to really change my mind. So now it's like, I don't have time to waste. Like, I don't have time to waste because I want him to be proud of me
Mhm.
no matter what. And so like I push myself to do better and be uncomfortable, as uncomfortable as I can be in certain situations because I need to be that person. It's different because before I was like, poor me, poor me. And now I'm like, yo, fuck everybody. I'm doing me and I'm fucking dope at what I do. So fuck it, you know?
And that's the gift to him is you being the best version of you.
Oh yeah.
Like when
Of course.
people pass, I think sometimes we think that like we're supposed to be sad. And like if we have a moment where we're not, we almost feel guilty, like, oh, I'm forgetting. But
Yep.
it's like the person that loved you wouldn't actually want you sitting around all day doing nothing but thinking about them and being sad about it. Like they want you to live a full, happy, rich life while
Exactly.
carrying the lessons that they taught you.
Therapy really opened my eyes to that because I wasn't like, I was like, I lost my biggest supporter. Nothing means anything. I don't care if people are proud of me because he's not here. Like, why am I even doing this? It's pointless now. And when they were like, yeah, but why do you think he was pushing you so hard? Or why do you think, and they really, like, my therapist really opened it up to like, nah, you're wrong. You're thinking the wrong way. He wanted to make sure that you were pushing yourself to be better and great because he believed in you and he wouldn't want you not to believe in yourself. So, it was just like one of those lessons where it was like, oh, and it took me a little while to be like, oh, I believe in myself. Like I could do what I think I want to do and, like be as positive as I could because I was like, oh, I've been through so much and like I don't know, I was like, I don't know if this is gonna break me. And I really did think that this was gonna be like the breaking point where I was gonna be like, oh my God, I'm not gonna survive. And I'm surviving, like it's hard. It's still hard. It's not like it's easy. I mean, it's definitely easier than it was before, but it's still hard. He has such an impact on me. And like, I still wear his clothes. I rock like, I have this he had a rose quartz that he had on his chest that he had taped up while he was sick. So I have that and I wrapped it so then I could have it as a necklace. There are like certain items that I have of his. There was a hat that he had and I accidentally dropped it in this fucking shit water in the Bronx. Me and my best friend were sitting there. We were like, "Oh, what the fuck do we do?" And he was like, "Put it in a bag. Put it in a plastic bag. We're gonna have to figure it out later." And it's like, and we're sitting. Oh my god, it was so gross. It was gross. I still have the hat. I washed the shit out of that thing, and I was
Literally
like,
watch the shit out of it.
"Oh yeah, no, it was so gross."
So it sounds like you really like have made a lot of progress just in terms of like how you've been able to deal with it in like healthier ways. Do you think that you'll get to a point where you'll like date again or have you tried dating again or what has that been like?
Yeah. I it was weird because like when Reggie was sick, he was like, I feel like you should be dating other people. And I was like, okay, why the fuck would I do that? I would never. He was like, oh, I want you to be happy. He wanted me to live my life and be there, but like not be as invested as I was. And I was like, oh, you stuck with me. So too bad. And, so I knew he wanted me to move on. Like I knew that was something that he was okay with. So it was weird, like, going out on your first couple dates. It's super weird. The first few were weird, and I apologize to those people that are listening. Because I was just weird, like I wasn't comfortable. I didn't really know what to expect. People would try to introduce me to people, and it was just odd. But eventually I started like, opening myself up to that. And I was like, you know what? He would want me to be happy. And it's not like, I'm getting into like a fucking relationship and I forget about him and everything that has happened between us. Like, no, he's definitely a part of my life. Anyone that dates me knows that part of my heart is his. So and that's never going to change, which is hard. I think a lot of people, a lot of men especially, they're like, oh shit, you can't give me everything. And it's not that I don't want to. I'm going to give you all that I can and all that
Mhm.
I want to give you. But you also have to understand there was a part of me that was with somebody else and that will always be with someone else. Like they took that part. And so, finding somebody that's open to that and as, like willing to be okay with that is hard.
Have you met anybody
Yeah.
you really like?
Yes, it's good. It took a while. It wasn't like automatic. Like it was definitely not automatic. There was things that I had to get through in order to be with someone different.
'Cause there's a lot of
I
layers there. It's not just like,
yeah.
"Oh, I was in a relationship, it didn't work out, and now I'm gonna try this new relationship." There's a lot of baggage there, some of it being really good baggage, like, some of it being like,
Yeah.
"Wow, we had these really great memories together," and it's hard to, like, put another person in that
Yeah.
place. There's a lot of layers there, and it's gonna take a
It's
long time of being with somebody to work even some of those kinks out, because some of it's not
mhm.
even gonna come up right away
No.
until something happens or you go somewhere or you see
Yep.
something and then it comes right back.
It took a while. It did take a while to find anybody to really like connect to. And then when I found somebody to talk to, it was just like, wow, this is dope. Like I really enjoy it. And like, it's day by day. I'm not thinking about, the future, like all that stuff. Like I'm trying to figure out what's happening now. And
Mhm.
like how to move or if I want to move. Like, like those are the thoughts that I'm just having now. And it's kind of like, all right, I'm good. I'll figure it out. But I'm not stressing it and I'm not pushing anything. Like, no, I'm
That's
good.
good. It's best to live that way anyway, just like in the moment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you think
Most
that Reggie's passing has given you a new outlook on life or a new lease on life?
It made me realize I couldn't take anyone for granted. I try so hard to like talk to my friends, check up on them. It really put some perspective on like who was really important. They know who exactly they are. They know that they're my top priorities at all moments. And like, I now as I continue my career and my journey in life, like I look at, you know, what's important to me. I try not to stress the dumb shit. The relationships you have and those moments of like conversations that you have with people, those are the things that you're gonna like really, really want to remember. And those are the things that like I try to cherish as much as possible as I continue.
And knowing who Reggie was, just as little as I knew him, but just the part of him I knew, that's exactly what I think he would want.
Oh yeah, he was always living his life. He was going, woo, and I was like, yo, I got you, and it was just like me and him, like just going crazy. And it was like, oh, that's why it was cool. We never judged each other. Like we never like whatever it was like, oh, you're you, and I accept that.
Do you have advice for anybody that might be going through this right now? Like losing,
Yeah.
a person that they're in love with?
Oddly enough, there was somebody at my job that passed away recently, and his girlfriend was somebody that, like, nobody really knew, but they spoke of. And, like, I actually reached out to her, and she was going through the same thing that I was going through. And I told her, I was like, the one thing I could tell you is you got to take care of yourself. Because when you're in that moment of like taking care of someone else, your mindset is just not going to be the same. Like you're not thinking about yourself as much and you feel bad. Like I always felt bad calling someone or being sad or not being happy when they were around. And I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I need to be me and I need to be okay with it. And the people around me, they have to accept that this shit is happening and I'm going through it. And you know what? If you can't deal with it, then you could just step aside and I'm okay with that. Like if you can't handle my emotions, I'm good. But you got to look out for you. And that's the one thing. Like you really have to make sure that you're okay to get, the help that you need before dealing with so and so's parents, so and so's whoever, like whoever is connected to them. You got to do you and you can't feel bad about it.
So what is next for you? Like, what are you working on right now?
Whew. So I have a few podcasts that I produce. So I'm working on a new podcast with these two men that are really dope. Black fathers. It's about like, them being single fathers and being there for their kids and like all that stuff. So it's really cool. It's called Notorious POP. That should be coming out soon.
I
And
like
then I
that
have,
name.
right? They're so funny. They're so funny. I was like, Reggie would have loved to be part of this. Like it would have been hilarious. But um I have that, and then I have another podcast called Book of Rhymes, which is, interviewing legends in hip hop. So it's with Don Will, who's the host. I don't know if you know him. He's rapper, producer, DJ, everything. Amazing. And then I have another podcast with it's me and one of my boys. His name is Carlos. We interview up and coming artists. And then I also have my own podcast, which is about being Filipino and growing up in America, or like in Yonkers, I guess, New York. So I'm just doing a whole bunch of different things, and working out every possible angle now to where people can have fun. Like it's a crazy time. So entertain, that's what I'm trying to do. Entertain as much as possible.
Oh, thank you for coming on tonight and
Yeah.
talking and like being so open. Like I know a lot of this stuff isn't probably easy to talk about again, and just being in that moment again. So I appreciate you sharing your story, and I feel like it can really help other people that are going through the same thing. Thank you for your strength, Mika.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Can people reach out to you?
Yes, you can find me at FT_MIKA_. That's Twitter and IG. I'm there. I'm always active. DM
Awesome.
me. Yes.
And please reach out to me at Tanisha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and let me know what you think of today's show. And until next time, wish me love. Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.